Hyperbolic V2. This is a super safe and effective natural anabolic. Not only is this product going to help you increase protein synthesis, which basically means muscle recovery and growth, it also may inhibit myostatin, which is a protein in your body that is known to inhibit muscle growth. This is a complete natural anabolic that works through multiple different pathways, has multiple trademarked ingredients. If you are a natural athlete looking for that edge, Hyperbolic V2 is what you need. Get yourself some.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pro Physique Code. Today it's Lexie and myself. Evan's on a little vacay. How you doing, Lexie?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'll be honest, it's Tuesday today, which this is going to come out next Monday, but this feels like the start of the new year. I know it's the 7th, but like Monday, Tuesday felt like, okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, I feel
back
that.
to
I feel like at least it threw me off having New Year's Day on Wednesday and then Christmas was on Wednesday. Like
yeah.
that was a heavy hitter.
Yeah. I saw somebody post something that said, this is the most Monday, Friday I've ever had. Like Friday felt like Monday to a lot of people last Friday. So, and I agreed with that. I was like, it does not feel like Friday. Um, but yeah, so I think we'll start with, and who knows, in the next few days, more information could be coming out, but we'll just start with the latest update on the fit model division. Then we're going to get into some prep questions. We got some great ones for today. And I think you said you're going to get a fit model suit in from Angels. So
Yes.
we're probably going to create, a kind of all-inclusive video when we have a few more answers, but there are now 2 shows confirmed. And I'm assuming now at this point, the rest of the shows will follow suit. There are now 2 shows that are going to have IFBB Pro Cards Junior USAs, which this year it actually moved. It's still in Charleston, but it moved to the last weekend of May, like May 30th,
Yeah,
where it
maybe.
used to be May 17th. So, I talked a little bit last year. We talked about that was one of the smallest national shows ever, with only 52 girls in the bikini division, and they gave out 4 pro cards, which was the top 4 in the overall. They did 8 classes. Now they're announcing they're going to be giving out 4 fit model pro cards as well, matching the bikini total.
Yeah, and you and I talked about that before we started the podcast, and I don't know, it just seems very interesting because like technically at this point nobody is qualified. Like nobody has stepped on stage in Fit Model yet. And it is the first show is not for another 2 weeks. It's the LA Fit Expo where they're going to have fit models. So it just seems like such a quick turnaround time. So it will be very interesting to see like how many girls actually show up, not only in the fit model division at these regional shows, but nonetheless show up at Junior USA's to get their pro card.
Yeah, I have so many questions. And I don't want to disparage what's happening or, demean it in any way, but it just feels like it's creating more questions than it's answering when they add a pro qualifier, but they haven't even had an NPC show yet. So I'm just curious now. I wasn't really a full-time coach when bikini came out, and that was 2009, right? So I was still just young in the sport. I was actually competing that year, had no intentions of, I don't remember when they started giving out pro cards of bikini, if it was the same way, if there was literally like 5 girls at a show and they gave out a pro card, I don't remember. Now I do know when you have a new division, you've got to fill up the pro spots, right? Because you want to have some pro shows, but I would assume there's going to be a lot of bikini pros that are dropping down to do this division.
Yeah, that's what I'm really curious about because I know of like one person off the top of my head that I know is a bikini pro dropping down. I know I would say it's been about an even mix of like girls that I work with who have competed before and in bikini and they are kind of interested in maybe doing fit model, but I find that the majority of my girls in particular that have been interested in fit model are girls that have never even competed before, like girls that have wanted to compete but have felt a little like turned off by like how much muscle they have to have for bikini. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many current bikini competitors or even pros do drop down to this. Or, we've talked about this before, like how many of the like old, not old age wise, but like older bikini pros, like we talked about Lauren Dannemiller before, like she like, hasn't competed in a little while. It'll be interesting to see if like some past bikini pros that were doing really well come back into fit model. I don't know.
Yeah, I think especially because I think, you know, in my mind, Lauren Dannemiller was kind of that last old school bikini pro that was trying to grow into the new division. And I think had she just stayed, you know, how she was when she turned pro, she fit that criteria perfectly. So yeah, she's someone that stands out in my mind. Even when she was coming up, when I was coaching her, I used to get a lot of comments like, "Oh, she reminds me of Janet Leyu," you know, like structure wise and shape and beauty and all those things. So yeah, I'll be curious. So I went on the website for Junior USA's and Junior Nationals to see if they had changed the requirements to be qualified, because for bikini to be qualified to compete at a pro qualifier, you have to have placed either top two in an open class at a national qualifying NPC show or top five at a national show. And if you've placed top two in the last 2 years, 23 or 24, you can compete in 25. But based on the current rules, you cannot be qualified in bikini and cross over to fit model. Now, that's not to say that tomorrow or today we couldn't hear, oh, if you're a nationally qualified bikini competitor, you're allowed to do fit model. I don't think they would do that because that would just prevent all those girls that were going to do fit model this year from doing it until the national shows, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, I don't want to like it's hard to be super solid with these like what they're coming out with now because it's been changing so drastically. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a rhyme and reason for why they're doing what they're doing, but I mean, I'd be curious to just hear what that reason is.
Yeah, well, and listen, we're going to find out in a couple of weeks. LA Fit Expo is going to be the first show to have it. But the problem that is like, you know, you and me, Lexi, are pretty much full-time prep coaches. We didn't know this was coming, so it's not as if we have a bunch of girls that are like, "Hey, let's go do." I have one girl doing that show right now, and she's doing bikini, um, and so it was just not on my radar. So, like, as competitors and as prep coaches, we kind of build things out. We don't just kind of react. We have a plan.
Exactly. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, we found out about this middle of December. And yeah, like you said, as prep coaches, I mean, we plan really far ahead of time with our clients. So I don't think this was, I mean, I heard a rumor about this like months ago. And I kind of like personally, I thought, well, if it's going to happen, it wouldn't happen until 2026. Cause I thought that, you know, obviously they would announce it with ample time. But then it came out. So yeah, it hasn't really given a lot of people time to plan. So I guess, you know, maybe girls that naturally are just genetically they stay leaner or they already are not that far off from fit model, they may
Right.
just be able to jump into these shows really quickly without really doing a long extensive prep. But for, you know, for other people it's not like they're going to be able to just jump into these shows early in the season, you know, because they're not going to be ready yet.
Yeah, I've purchased my ticket to travel to the Fit Expo, and I think a lot of my trip is going to be focused around being there to document this, you know, because I was there when they did wellness there a couple of years ago. And I was kind of amazed at how amazing the wellness looked at that show. I didn't realize at the time a lot of the international competitors from like Brazil were going to come up and do that show. But that was a little different. There was a little more notice on that. With this wellness, the difference was there was already a large contingent of competitors competing in wellness. There's nobody that's done fit model. Not to say that you need to be have been doing it for a long time, but yeah, it's going to change. In my mind, it's going to cut bikini in half because you're going to have competitors that were planning to do bikini just switch to fit model. I don't necessarily think. I don't know. You know, time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that, you know, on this topic, we can kind of jump into a question I got. And I'm sure a lot of people probably have this question, especially if they're listening and they've never competed before. But I had a question and somebody asked, should first time competitors stick to fit model? So, I mean, I think personally, a lot of first time competitors are going to fall into that fit model category. However, I think you and I both, Paul, we see these, you know, outliers all the time. We see these girls that maybe they've been athletes their entire life and they just have a lot of muscle density, but they've never competed before. So, like, those people probably are not going to start in fit model, right? Whereas I would say the standard, like, new first time competitor, I would say fit model is going to probably be a really good route for them to start with.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the athlete, but I don't think that there's going to be a huge variation between fit model and bikini at the lower level of the sport. I think the big difference is going to be in the pros and the pro card winners at the national shows. They're not going to let any of these girls have any hardness, any striations, anything like that, right? They're going to really keep a close eye on what they're allowing to be pro. Um, but at the earlier shows, yeah, I would say if you're newer to competing, you would pick the one. But here's the other thing to consider. If you like bikini, I think this is just going to make bikini a little bit less competitive early on because you're going to have potentially some of these really good bikini competitors try fit model. So, yeah, I think whichever division you prefer, and this is what the when I first started coaching, there was a lot of athletes I had in figure, and people would say, which one should I do? And I'd say, which one do you see yourself doing long term? That's the one to stick with.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I've been telling. That's actually the exact thing I've been telling all my athletes who have asked, like, should I do fit model or bikini? Is like, well, which one do you really like? Like, which one do you love? Because I mean, if there's no point in doing a division if like you just don't like it or you don't like the look or you don't want to look like that, right? Because you can always grow into bikini, and I've been honest with some of my athletes about like, hey, okay, you like bikini better, which is fine, but we probably are going to need to spend a lot more time growing before we get on stage for bikini. And you know what? If they're fine with that, then hey, bikini's the route we take.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see if the bikini division gets even a little bit more muscular and a little more defined um, at the lower levels, and then if you have girls that are like, you know what, I have more muscle, so maybe the division shrinks a little, but becomes more, you know, athletic or muscular or conditioned, if you want to call it. But I mean, being at 40 shows this year, I'll say this was the least competitive NPC bikini season I've ever seen, right? Like there were shows where, you know, maybe one girl stood out, maybe two. There wasn't like, whereas in the past I would be like, man, the overalls would be crazy. Like who's going to win? I didn't feel like that was the case this year. There was usually one or two standout girls per show. So I just don't, unless there is an influx of new competitors, which I've been busy. I've been having a lot of consults. So I feel like there is more interest in the sport early in the year than there was maybe early last year. It's hard to remember, but yeah, one thing we'll tell, and that's time. I mean, I remember last year when I got back from Junior USA's, just being like 52 girls, and there was 25 at the Arnold. 25 at the Arnold, 52, and I was like, "Is this the trend?" And sure enough, it was. It was the trend. It was the smallest year since we've been a part of it. So I think this is the correction. So where do you fit? And it's hard to answer because there can be a lot of speculation, but we haven't seen it yet. We still haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think a lot of people are kind of just sitting back and like kind of watching these first
Yeah.
shows. I don't think a lot of people want to be the guinea pig. Some people maybe, but that's why I even kind of wonder. I'm like, gosh, these first couple shows with Fit Model, like who's gonna want to be the guinea pig? Who's gonna like? Are there gonna be a lot of girls even stepping on
Well,
stage?
and is that going to carry? Is that going to so being like I'm an IFBB Pro fit model? Is that going to carry the same cachet as I am an IFBB Bikini Pro? I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
it's definitely not early on. It may develop, but I just think, with every division, it just takes time because, I mean, even when the first bikini pros were happening in like 2010, I remember being in the gym and someone being like, "Oh, that she's an IFBB pro," and someone else was like, "Yeah, but in bikini," and I was like, "Oh, So now
yeah.
it's not the case. Now it's like, "Oh, she's a bikini pro." Yeah.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. Well, so kind of similarly, kind of on the bikini pro topic. So somebody asked, to be successful in the pro bikini level, do you think you would have to take PEDs? So I feel like we've gotten this question kind of before, but I feel like it's, nobody really wants to talk about this, but I feel like it's a good one for us to answer, even though we're not going to have like a,
I mean, at this point, I would say 98% of women, yeah.
yeah.
I'd say
I
there's
think
still outliers.
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely doable to turn pro naturally. It may take a little bit more time just to build up that density because I feel like that you need more density, you need more muscle is always that like amateur feedback. And I
What
think
was
like
how was that question worded? Was it to be
okay,
successful?
so they said okay, so they said to become successful. Okay, yeah, so they said to become successful in the pro bikini level, do you think you would have to take PEDs?
So that also comes down to Lexi to how do you define success?
That's so true. So I personally would say what this person probably means is, to be in cracking the top 5 as a bikini pro at these pro shows.
Yeah, so I mean, Lana last year was in top 5 at every show we did, and she got Olympia qualified at the Ben Weider, and she went to the Olympia before that as a natural athlete. So, um, uh, clearly it can be done. Is Lana a unique athlete? I think so, but I also thought she and I noticed they were pushing her. You know, the feedback was they wanted more muscle on her, and at 30 years old, with a decade of training, you're not putting on more muscle, significant more muscle without drugs, and that's not something she's interested in. So like I think the the feedback is signaling that yeah, you kind of gotta because Lana's I mean, you've stood next to Lana. She's very muscular for a female.
Yeah.
Um, so that's not every woman.
Yeah, I know nobody really wants to hear this, but I do feel like, I mean, I think we all know this at that elite level, like genetics is going to play a significant role. Because I have an athlete as well, and she's an amateur. She just started competing, and I mean, I think she has the potential to do very well this year. She's very young, and the amount of muscle she's put on naturally in such a short amount of time. I mean, you would think that she's been, taking PEDs, but she hasn't. But like, there are those
Yeah.
genetic outliers, and I know it's not what anybody wants to hear, but I think that yes, it can be done. You can be successful at the pro bikini level naturally. Is it a little bit more rare? Is it going to be very much so reliant on genetics? Probably. And I also think it just depends too. Like if you're a pro bikini competitor, it depends on like what show you're doing and who you're standing next to, right? Like if you go into a show where there's maybe not a ton of competition, you may just crack into the top 5 by kind of just who shows up that day, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, and there's also something to be said for showing up absolutely conditioned, peaked properly. And the other problem with, you know, being an natural athlete in the sport is I think the assumption is that you need to do stuff. So most of these coaches on their initial consults are like, "Hey, let's jump on a cycle of this before you give these athletes a chance to train and build for a year." If you put an athlete on drugs right away, their physique is going to change. So these coaches get to post some transformations. So you got to understand what you're doing. Is that what's best for you or what's best for your coach?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'm sure you get this even more than me, Paul, but like I cannot tell you how many times I've had like girls before that have never competed. They are kind of newer into the gym and will be on a consult call and they'll tell me that, they had an inquiry with, or they had a consult call with another coach, like maybe it was a local coach or someone that they were referred to from a family friend. And that coach was trying to tell them as a new competitor who had never been on stage before that they needed to take X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's baffling. But you're right. You have to kind of ask yourself, is it, is the, I guess, is the coach just wanting to put you on stage quickly looking good for their own benefit?
Yeah, that's a very real part of it, and that's why we see so many women come in and out of the sport so quickly. It might not seem like it, but I promise you, if you look at like the competitors on the Olympia stage in a year, there's probably close to a 50% turnover. You'll see the top girls come back, but they're the top girls for a reason. Genetically, they are elite, along with their, experience competing. But I'm telling you, like it's almost qualifying for the Olympia is so difficult. And then once the Olympia is over and you're no longer qualified and having to start that process over again, and then you know, now you've got to compete with the new girls that just turned pro plus those original girls. You know, it's every year I always say like getting back to the Olympia the second time is almost more impressive than the first time.
Yeah.
So Uh,
Speaking of which, on the topic of the Olympia, have they announced the Olympia dates for 20?
I keep looking. They have not. They have not. Yeah.
Okay.
Last year it was October 10th through the 14th.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like they're trying to move it to September, but the thing is they haven't announced it, which means we don't know when the qualifying date for the Olympia ends. It's usually 4 weeks before the Olympia. So, but when you're talking about something like the Olympia, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's contracts, there's the expo. It's in Las Vegas, so they're probably negotiating deals with, where they're going to have it. Last year it was at that RV World. I've never seen
Yeah,
it there before.
yes, Resorts World.
Resorts World, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. I'm like, did I miss it or yeah, because I
Well, so I created because I've been putting out like some content around the sport. I created like a little cheat sheet for all the shows you can turn pro at next year. And I put Amateur Olympia on there and I realized like, oh, we don't actually have a date. So I put it for October 10th to the 13th until I hear otherwise, because that's when it was last year.
okay, okay, interesting. I just wasn't sure if I missed it, but I'm sure that that's hard too for a lot of these athletes that right now that are like wanting to strategize. I mean, I know we know ballpark within the time it's going to be at, but I'm sure it's kind of a little stressful not having that exact date as an athlete.
I think it's more stressful for the guys, the bigger
Yeah.
bodybuilders. I don't think for the bikini division, but guys that are trying to grow and improve their placings at a show like that where they got to pack on more muscle. That I think that's probably more, um, of a concern. But we will have the Arnold, and then this year the Pittsburgh show. They just keep announcing more and more prize money. They are throwing so much money at this competition. Um, Yeah, I think it was 50,000 they're giving away for bikini, which is huge. 25,000 to the winner. And then they just announced all the divisions like wellness, figure, what was the other one, are all getting $20,000 for the prizes. Um, yeah, Tyler just made another announcement yesterday. So and I think they're doing, I want to say $250,000 for bodybuilding. Like it's got some serious firepower this year. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The announcement that Tyler put out yesterday was a total of $20,000 will be given away for the pro wellness, figure, and women's physique divisions.
okay, yeah.
That brings the total prize money given away at the Pittsburgh Power and Fitness Festival to 410K.
410, yeah. So 250,000 of that is um the bodybuilding, and then 50 is for bikini, and I think 50 is for classic, and then the rest are all getting 20 or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, it just shows that they're trying to make that a more prominent show. It has a huge name as a top tier pro show, but it's clearly Arnold Olympia and then everything else. I think that Pittsburgh is, potentially on that way to being on that level. Although I think the Arnold is giving away even more money this year. I think they're giving away like $500,000 for bodybuilding, something crazy. I don't keep up with it that closely, but yeah. Um, but of course that has the Arnold Expo behind it, which gets, I don't know, over 100,000 people through those doors.
It, oh my gosh, yeah, that expo is crazy. Like I mean, I feel like it brings in a lot of people that aren't even just like bodybuilding
Oh
fans.
yeah. Yeah.
Like the Olympia is a little bit more like a lot of bodybuilding fans, but the Arnold is
Much
just
more focus.
everybody. And I remember, I think it was last year, it was on Saturday. There was a point where I was stuck, like,
Yeah.
like close to the stage, like I could not move, and I was basically just like in this like I don't know, this mush of people and like I couldn't move. And that was the craziest feeling ever. Like I couldn't even get to my booth. So it is a busy expo.
All right. So I'm gonna ask a question. Because I did get some good questions from you guys. So the big thing with us is getting feedback from you guys. So comment right now if you're listening on YouTube. Um, what you would like to see from us specifically, because that's what we like to go with. Um, so the question is a prep question, and it's a sentence, but I'm gonna assume we know what you mean. Push cardio or calories to get conditioned. Um, and what I assume they mean by that is if you've hit a sticking point, should you adjust your calories or your cardio? I, for one, as a coach, always adjust both unless we've reached a point where I can no longer go lower with calories or I can no longer go higher with cardio. And then that's when I start to play around with recovery days, double cardio days, refeed and diet breaks, right? So yeah, that's I will rarely ever just drop calories and not add cardio. I try to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, I'm the same exact way. And I even think too, some clients, I'll have some clients that will even ask specifically, they'll be like, hey, if you need to make an adjustment this week, like I'm willing to do a little bit more cardio if that means I can keep my food. So, that I'm always willing to hear that side of things too, from a client. Or let's say we get to a spot where we're kind of like we've hit basically the ceiling with cardio and the basement with calories and we don't have a lot of wiggle room. Like you said, there's obviously things like refeeds, diet breaks, recovery days, push days, pull days, but sometimes that'll be a time too where I will, instead of adding in cardio, I'll say like let's just add in a lot of steps. That way you can very passively just move more throughout the day, because that can make a big difference. Like I can't tell you how many times, like this is prep, like prep aside, but like I'll have clients that go on vacation and it's like, let's say it's a very adventurous outdoorsy vacation, they're just walking all day, they'll come back home and they drop weight, right? So I do believe that there's a lot of power in that NEAT. So that's a variable. Like the step goal is definitely something I'll really push up high at the end if we've kind of reached our like max thresholds with food and
Yeah.
cardio.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I just did a couple interviews with our last challenge winner. So our next transformation challenge is about to open up. Um, it's going to start in early February. But both of the people that I spoke to, which was our over 50 female champion and our male overall champion, both set step goals. And that's, they both lost more than 30 pounds in 90 days. And it was based around steps. And so, yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful thing that most people don't think about is how sedentary we typically become in our lives. And then you change that one narrative, like you said, you go on vacation to Europe where you can't drive everywhere, or maybe you go on vacation to a big city like New York City where it's much more common to walk around, and you eat freely, and lo and behold, you come home and you're like, man, I didn't even track my calories, I lost weight. And so yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge.
It's really funny too, because I was like, with where I live, I walk a lot. I walk to the gym, I walk to the store, like I walk a lot, like going from place to place. And when I was back in St. Louis for Christmas, I wasn't doing that. And oh my God, it was just weird, just like seeing my steps. I had to be so much more intentional in St. Louis because I was driving everywhere. I was no longer walking from place to place. So yeah, those steps can definitely help out.
Yep, yep. All right, so I'll let you have one.
Okay. Question about this person asked, how sore is too sore to train the same muscle group? So,
Yeah, I mean, so I actually went back to school and studied a little bit of exercise science, strength and conditioning training, and we talk a little bit about frequency and training when sore. Um, it's a tricky question because it depends on your goal. If your goal is to build the most muscle, I don't think that it's very beneficial to train when sore, um, because the muscle's not recovered. However, if strength training is your goal, I noticed training when I was sore, I did tend to get stronger quicker, right? So I would do as many as 3 squat or 3 deadlift or 3 bench sessions per week. And there would be days where I would go in and be very sore, get warmed up, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm actually moving some weight today. Um, so it's just probably a matter of preference. But, I think, Lexi, the way we train, like, a lot of our athletes are training a muscle group 3 times a week. There might be some initial soreness because you're not used to the frequency, but I think you get adapted to that pretty quickly. So I'll tell athletes like, hey, if you're sore, maybe do a lighter workout that day. Just back off the intensity, get a little blood flow in there. I think that nutrient delivery can help the recovery speed up. But I definitely don't want someone to get injured. And anytime there's a soft tissue involved, a tendon, a ligament, a back, a shoulder, where there's like some pain, that's when I say like, no, 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 we do not want to train right now.
oh yeah, absolutely. I would say like the soreness and the pain, those are like two totally different things. But yeah, if I ever have a client who's like it's not muscle fatigue soreness, like it's pain. Absolutely, we don't want to dabble with that. But I've actually found, so this doesn't happen a lot, but I remember the last time I was sore in my glutes. And I remember I had, I think, like a glutes and shoulder day, like 2 days later or something like that. And I actually found that when I was just a little sore in my glutes, it helped me to activate my glutes even better the next time I trained them. Just because I was like, it wasn't like debilitating sore, but I was still a little sore in my glutes. So I found that the next time I trained them, it was actually a lot easier for like, they turned on a lot easier. I felt so much better and or so much more mind muscle connection and engagement. So, and I've heard some people say that before too. So I feel like I don't know if that would pertain to upper body. I've never experienced that with upper body, but for glutes, with as much as I train them, I do feel like sometimes a little bit of soreness. Like it does suck in the beginning when you're just kind of getting going and you're getting in the gym and like
Yeah.
warming up the muscle. But then you kind of get into the thick of it, and it actually sometimes helps a little bit with, especially like those isolation exercises. It just helps with better recruitment on those.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you know, what's funny is like when a muscle is sore, you know, you're targeting it right. So like when I was young, you know, age myself here before the internet, one of the ways that I used to test myself at the gym, I'd be like, okay, I really want to grow, say, my shoulders or like my medial delts, right? I would go in the gym and I would do an exercise for like 10 sets of 10, and then I would see where I was sore the next day. So, you know, if I'm bench pressing and I'm sore in just my shoulders, I'm like, well, my chest isn't going to grow because my shoulders are sore. So maybe I'm benching wrong, or maybe it's a better movement for me to do something else. So I used to experiment on myself. So soreness can actually indicate to you, hey, you know, I had a client the other day, and I sent her a lower body training session, and there was no hip thrusts in it. And she's like, well, aren't we trying to grow glutes? I said, well, let's just see what happens. For like 2 days, she was complaining that her glutes were so sore. I said, so you don't have to do hip thrusts to train the glutes. The glutes are big movers. So things like deficit step back lunges and leg press with your feet in a certain position and seated hip abductions, you can target these big muscles. You don't have to do, air quotes, like just a movement that you think is that. So soreness is a great indicator that like, hey, we're stimulating the right area. So yeah, I don't want to say never train when you're sore. I'm also, you know, I made these mistakes. So I used to go into the gym and foam roll and put on icy hot and take a lead just to get going in a workout. I think that's a huge mistake because inflammation is your body's way of saying, hold up here, there's a problem. That's a pain that your brain is being told like, hey, there's a problem here. If you constantly train through inflammation, it will turn into tendonitis, tendinosis. You will develop, you know, issues that may require you to like actually not train for months. So, you know, trust the old guy. Knee tendonitis, elbow tendonitis, shoulder tendonitis, you do not want those things.
No, no. Yeah, so I guess this is kind of a dependent question. Most of the time, no, you probably don't want to be training if you're super, super sore. But I think if you're a little sore, it's not the end of the world. And sometimes it
Yeah.
helps. If you're a little sore, I don't know about you, Paul, but I find that if I just like sit and I don't move, it makes it worse. Whereas if like I get up
Correct.
and I just kind of walk around and get some blood flow, like it actually does kind of help to subside a little bit of that soreness.
Yep. I listen, if you think about how the muscle recovers, getting blood, oxygen, nutrients into the muscle is great. So, you know, if you're really sore and you want to heal quicker, I would say go do a light workout where you're just focused less on like intensity, more on just slower tempo and getting some blood in there. Um, and then what'll happen is like you'll adapt to that and you won't get as sore the next time you go through those sessions. So
Sure.
yeah, yeah, perfect. All right, I guess I can drop one here. Man, I got some great. So John Hanson sending me pictures from like the 70s of bikini champions. Like the
No, you
NABBA used to have a bikini division, and I'm like, man, how did we never? I don't know. We never talk about that. Um, okay, so this is an interesting one because it's a time of year where I don't typically get these kind of questions. What do you do about extreme diet fatigue from eating disorders and from prep? I mean, I feel like you addressed and answered the question there. If you've got extreme diet fatigue, eating disordered behaviors from prep, it's probably best to not prep, right? You want to, you know, this is something that as coaches we are very familiar with. I think there's two things. A is how long did you diet for? That's going to determine your fatigue level. And B, what style of diet did you use to get on stage? So I think there's almost an association where people just assume you should have an eating disorder, and you should be binge eating after stage, and you should be fatigued. I disagree. I think there are ways to get on stage, be successful, and come out of it. Um, and most famously, to include your approach to nutrition. Are you being flexible with your diet, right? Did you get a meal plan that's got 6 foods on it and you've been on it for 6 months? That is literally the recipe for an eating disorder. That is a recipe for diet fatigue. However, if you're able to fit things into your diet, if you've been had calories come up, if you've undulated your intensity with cardio and training and diet throughout prep, honestly, sometimes getting to stage can feel very normal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's this stigma in like the world of bodybuilding. And like, this is not me saying it's not going to be hard because it is a hard sport. But I think that sometimes there's this stigma that like it's got to be like debilitating and you've got to crush yourself and you've got to like you're going to come out of it and you're going to need this long period of time to just recover, and like it doesn't have to be like that. And I feel like there's a lot of girls that put pressure on themselves too to constantly be getting on stage, and usually that leads to them maybe starting a prep when they shouldn't start a prep. Maybe they're still dealing with some eating disorder tendencies, or maybe their biofeedback is still really crappy and nowhere where it needs to be for starting prep. So yeah, I would say if you are feeling diet fatigue or you're having any sort of eating disorder tendencies, like work on that first before starting a contest prep, because starting a prep is probably only going to make both of those things like way worse. And or what it's going to do is it's going to put a band-aid to those things, and then after prep it's going to make them even worse, so
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, we have a therapist on staff. Danica Johnson's amazing. So if I have somebody who's having, food eating disorders or, behavior issues around food, I recommend that they speak to Danica, who is herself an accomplished competitor and a licensed therapist. So, those are support tools that we have within Pro Physique for that reason, because, there is a scope of practice that we have as prep coaches. And, um, depending on where someone's at, we want to meet them there and make sure they're getting the support they need. So yeah, don't make it worse. Don't turn it into I can diet through my struggle.
yeah, exactly. And like I think a lot of people do think that prep is gonna sometimes heal those issues. And like I'll be honest, there maybe are some outliers where, prep can help with the eating disorder tendencies. I don't know, there could be some outliers, but for the most part, if you're already kind of struggling in that avenue, starting a prep is definitely not going to be the answer. And you know what? Don't be afraid to tell your coach this either. Like Paul mentioned, we have a mindset coach on our team, Danica. She's awesome. But as coaches, like we want to be able to hear about this stuff. Like we want to be able to provide you with the help you need to overcome some of these issues, whether we can provide it or we can refer you to somebody who's a little bit more equipped to give you that help that you need.
Yep. That's really the goal for us, is just to make sure that we're doing right by the athletes.
Exactly. Do you have another good one?
Yeah, I have actually had another great one right here. It says, how often do you decrease calories or adjust cardio based on the response in prep? And I'd say most commonly 1 week. I don't think it is beneficial to make adjustments more than weekly, especially at the beginning of prep. However, decreasing calories and things like that, the closer you get to the stage, the more attention you pay. So like, might do a bi-weekly check-in towards the end of prep. But yeah, understanding that daily adjustments would not be beneficial.
No, and it's like you've talked about it before. It's like that funnel concept. So usually
Yeah.
towards the beginning of prep, like, no, you're not going to probably need as many crazy changes as frequently, but towards the end of prep, it may be a little bit more like tedious with like different, changing things up a little bit more frequently. But I think it honestly depends on, well, first off, how the body is responding. So, if a client drops a decent amount of weight 1 week, like then there may not be a reason that we need to get their calories more aggressive or push their cardio up. So it depends on the progress. And I think it also depends on the time frame too. So if it's like a prep where we have ample time and we're probably ahead of schedule, we may not have to make those changes as quickly as if we had a shorter prep and we know that we're like barely, on track to make it. So that plays a role too.
This just in, the Ben Weider is offering the Fit Model
No
program.
doubt. Wow. You know what? Actually, I was gonna ask about that at the beginning. I thought about that. I was like, I wonder if they'll have Fit Model Ben Weider because I feel like Fit Model is definitely already kind of a natural division. There's no rule that it has to be, but I also feel like there may be some girls who maybe they've done bikini before, they've dabbled with some PEDs, and they're actually going to go down to Fit Model. So I guess that would make them not natural, essentially.
Yeah, the rule right now, I believe, for Ben Weider last year was 3 years PED free to be eligible to compete, and a lot of people failed the polygraph, so that wasn't a guarantee. There was international competitors that were not allowed to compete for failing the polygraph, so they upheld that. They said if you don't, and that's every competitor. That's not just if you win. That's every competitor had to do the polygraph. So I think that's substantial. As someone that comes from natural bodybuilding, that's how you know a show is natural, because to pass a polygraph, it's not just a blood test or a urine test where, something can be out of your system. It's got to be out of your brain.
Didn't they start the polygraph at Ben Weider this year? Because
This year was the first year. Yep.
I
Yep.
thought
Yep.
thought
Yep.
okay. Well, interesting. So yeah, we're gonna see. I mean, I would just say, like you said at the beginning, I think Fit Model is bound to be at pretty much every national show at this
I
point.
think at this point they're going to announce it. I mean, it's January 7th. So just creating the graphics for this, like this is like, I think every promoter is waking up right now and just talking about Fit Model, because they're like, hey, we're going to have it at our show. We're going to have it at our show. So, um, you know, I'm sure it's going to be at all the Florida shows. The shame is we don't have, in March this year, we don't have the Clash. The first pro show of the year in Florida is usually the Clash. It's usually like a couple weeks after the Arnold, draws a bunch of the girls from the Arnold in, and then it's a pretty big show with Sandy judging before like a Junior USA's. So we get a good amount of women at that show. We don't have that. So I don't know when the first big show will be in Florida. It's probably going to be the Girl Power, which is late April.
Um, yeah, I
It's
think
probably the first pro bikini show. And if I recall, Sandy, now that's a women's only event, so you can bet your sweet butt they're going to have Fit Model there.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'm looking at the NPC Florida schedule. So yeah, the first show that we have in Florida for the year is on April 5th. It's the Mel Chansey Muscle Classic, and that's usually always, I think, like the first show.
Mhm.
Um, And then after that there's a show in the Panhandle. Then there's the Diamond Classic. And then yeah, and then Girl Power. So Girl Power is probably, I would say, the biggest or the first biggest show of the year
Now
here.
that's female only, and it's going to have pro bikini. So I already have a pro or two planning for that show. So I know I'll be at that show. It's also in Orlando, where it's easy drive for us. So yeah, I'll be interested to see if we're bringing some Fit Model competitors at that show. But again, I'm just like Lexi. Every time I think about this, I'm like, it's just cutting. It's just going to cut into the bikini. So let's say they have 100 women competing, and 50 are in bikini and 50 in Fit Model. Was Fit Model a success, or did it? It's gonna have so many questions for me around it. Um,
I know. But it's like, honestly, I had this epiphany last week. I think I said this when I did an Instagram live. It's kind of cool to think like we're sitting here right now living this history, like think about it from like
yeah,
10 years from now. Cause like you and I both really weren't like active as coaches or athletes when bikini first came, right? So like we hear stories,
no.
but like now we're literally living this history, and we're going to be able to tell our clients and people later down the line, like, that we were living when it, or we were very present when it was like a new thing.
Yeah, I have a very distinct memory of the first time I saw bikini in 2009 at Deke Warner's show, the Mid Florida Muscle Classic. Um, and I was like, huh, what is this? Like it was literally just girls in off the rack suits that were in relatively good shape, but definitely not bodybuilding. And if I remember correctly, were they barefoot? I think they were barefoot.
Wow.
I can't, you know what? I have a picture on my phone. I'll have to look for it. But yeah, like, so it is interesting that we are going to be just riding this wave with the sport. And I think, I'm kind of looking forward to going. I wasn't necessarily like excited about going out to LA, because I haven't been to the Fit Expo in a few years, but like just witnessing the first, as far as I know, the first US show. I can't imagine there's one before that. It would have to
Oh.
be this weekend or next weekend.
Well, yeah, you'll be in LA, and then that same weekend I'll be at the women's seminar. So we'll get some good information between you being at the
Man,
actual show, and then I'll
yeah.
be with Sandy and get some information there. So that'll be a good podcast
I
afterwards.
mean, that is going to be a lot of information because
Yeah.
that is going to be, I mean, if we're getting the questions, that conference is just going to be all about the fit model.
I can't imagine. Like I've always gone to it. I've gone to it for the past couple years, and mainly I just go because it's like it's fun to be around everybody. And not to say usually like learn a ton that I haven't already like learned before, but this year I'm like, wow, okay, I'm gonna learn a lot because I really want to get some clarity on some of these things that are just a little confusing with regards to this new division. So
Is that?
yeah.
Yeah.
This is a good question. And obviously like we're not doctors, we're not, anything like that, but this person asked potential next steps to take if you've gone over a year without a period and your food is up and your cardio is down. So the first thing like I think of when I hear this question is I think a lot of times females like when they lose their cycle they assume it's just a matter of upping their food, gaining some body fat, maybe decreasing their cardio. And that, that definitely I think is part of it, but I would say if you've done that puzzle piece and there's still nothing, I would really consider first off, I think I'd definitely consult with a doctor or naturopath, whoever you confide in. But I think a really big part of like regaining one cycle is allostatic load and like your stimulus load and your stress overall on your body. And that's not just, through dieting and through ample amounts of cardio. That may be, maybe pulling your training frequency or intensity down a little bit, or, really working on like your stress management skills. Cause some people just, they like outside of training, they're just a stress case all the time, right? They're not getting adequate sleep. They're always in this fight or flight state. Like they never turn off. And like I've learned that that's a really big part of the hormones and like specifically the cycle too. Because I've had clients before that are not even in prep and they get their cycle up like clockwork, but then one month maybe they don't get their cycle or it's late, and it's because they had like like a crazy amount of stress that month. So I think people don't realize that like your stimulus load, your stress load, how you manage and perceive and interpret your stress, like that plays a big role as well. So that's something I just wanted to put out there.
Yeah. And I think you nailed it. Like stress has such a big impact on hormones. And I don't think you mentioned age, but, women can become perimenopausal in their late 30s, early 40s, or, everyone's different in that. So like the most important thing is go to see your doctor, but there's
Yeah.
getting some blood work done. They're going to be able to indicate if, you have some hormone out of whack. You can feel great and still be off in some regard. So, um, there's just so much variation in that. And again, scope of practice. If you're hiring a bodybuilding coach to fix your period, probably not the best route. If you're not working with a medical doctor also to like make sure you're in a good, I'm not saying a bodybuilding coach, like I'll definitely get someone healthy. I'll definitely make sure that my athletes keep their cycle and get their cycle back. I mean, I'm becoming famous now for my athletes getting pregnant right after their seasons end.
Oh my
um,
gosh.
you know,
Yeah, yeah. Go see a doctor, get blood work. And honestly, don't I see this sometimes too. Like sometimes I'll have athletes that they do go to their doctor for something in particular and they're not really given any help. So don't be afraid to like advocate for yourself and go like find, go don't be afraid to kind of shop around too and find somebody that's actually going to listen to you. But another thing too that I think is worth maybe like just touching on is when it comes to like this person asking specifically that they haven't gotten their cycle in over a year. Also like I see girls who come off of hormonal birth control, maybe they've been on it for like 7, 8, 9 years. I find that a lot of times it takes a little bit longer to regain your cycle after that compared to somebody who just like loses their cycle post show, but they are
right.
on control. So the birth control, like the hormonal birth control, depending on how long you were on it for, because it does, from what I've like done research on, it does being on birth control does usually heighten your like oxidative stress. So naturally, just being on birth control, if that's in your past, it could take a little bit longer to regain that cycle because of that.
Yep. Yep. Be safe. Just because you think you're not getting it, be safe. All right. You want to finish with like maybe one more?
Yeah, one more. Yeah, what you got to good end us with a good one.
How to choose the right coach for prep from Sam. Malfitano. No, not familiar with her. I mean, so I'll just go back to my process. Back in 2007, when I was thinking about competing, I was watching some competitive athletes and I thought, wow, I like the way that these guys look and perform. And then I found some content that was being put out by Lane Norton on bodybuilding.com, and he was talking about the process. So it took me a few months, maybe even longer, to go, okay, I see what he does here. He's coaching people in a manner that I approve of. And also he's getting the result that I would want. Not to say just because you hire a coach that's won the Olympia or won a lot of pro cards doesn't mean that's going to be your end result. But I did want someone that I had seen had gotten the results that I was after, right? So, because I think if you have faith that the person you're working with has the ability to get where you want to go, it helps. Now, I'm not to say like, you know, you can't be your coach's first grade athlete, but trust your instincts and make sure you're getting what you need from your coach. I mean, I would also say set up a phone call. Like if you're not able to speak to the coach you want to work with, that could be an issue. Make sure you have a rapport, make sure you have a good understanding of each other. My favorite consultations, they come with a list of questions. What does the
Mhm.
diet look like? What's the most cardio I'll have to do? Can you explain this? Can you explain that? I love that because now when they sign up, we know each other. They're starting off right. I know what their goal is, and it's a very clear and defined approach for both of us. Um, so yeah, I don't make a rush decision. Don't trust, I don't know, one athlete. Make sure if you're gonna, talk to a couple athletes, talk to the coach. Yeah, I think because some people can get caught up in an emotional decision and be like, oh my gosh, so and so DM'd me. I'm ready to go. If someone's doing DM outreach, there might be a reason for that. That might be a red
Yeah.
flag.
Yeah, I'll save. Yeah, because I have opinions on that. I feel like DM outreach is a little for coaching. I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. But yeah, I think doing like if
Lexi, you're being too nice. You and I know there's assholes out there that DM our clients.
yep, oh yeah, and you know
Oh,
what?
and listen, coaches, we know who you are. We know you're an asshole.
That's literally what I was gonna say. Cause like the funny thing is I had a client this was a while ago. She literally sent me the screenshot. I mean, cause we have like that trust and that relationship. And she sent me a screenshot from another coach that I knew. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But okay. But yeah, DM outreach is a little odd. But I think another thing too is like if you have a coach that you're interested in hiring, or maybe a couple of coaches, because there's nothing wrong with, interviewing a couple, like do your research on them, like on, if they have obviously Instagram or YouTube. I feel like I know, I don't know about you, Paul, but I feel like because we both have YouTube channels, a lot of times, like when I'm on a consult call with somebody that's watched me on YouTube, they kind of already know who I am. They know my philosophies. They already, they've watched me. They've realized, oh, I think I'd get along well with her. So I feel like doing your research on the coach, if they have, social platforms, is helpful to just get to know them a little bit more. And then, yeah, of course, schedule a consult call and kind of look at it as an interview. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions. And not only do I like consult calls for like the questions, but I think it's a good time too to like see if you're going to jive with that, that coach or that athlete, right? Because sometimes, you could interview a really great coach, but just if your personality doesn't really match with them, or I don't know, maybe you want somebody who's a little bit more bubbly compared to stern, or vice versa, right? So like those things matter too. So I think consult calls and just, not being afraid to come with a list of questions. And then, you mentioned, Paul, don't just ask like one athlete their experience from a coach. And I agree with that. I think though, if you know a coach coaches a couple of select athletes, just maybe reach out to all of them and just ask them about their experience, what they like, what they dislike. I think that's a good way to kind of get a feel for the coach as well.
Yep. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Like looking at what they've done and then having a conversation with them. And then also like, I think it's important to ask maybe what the coach's career aspirations are because, I do speak to a lot of athletes that are like, yeah, I want to compete. I worked with my local coach, but they hate the sport. They didn't want to go to the shows. They disagree with the placings. And I'm like, well, I get that, but you can't have an athlete that has a different kind of goal than the coach. Like if the coach dislikes the sport, but I'm going to prep you, eventually there's going to come a point where the athlete's going to outgrow that coach, right? And vice versa. Like, so when I say like, I want to win the Olympia, I want to win pro cards, I want to win overalls, I want to win novice titles, like my goals are to go to shows, have my athlete get moved to center, and then after the show, have the judge be like, ah, I knew that one was yours. I can tell they look good. You know, that to me is kind of like, okay, I know I'm doing the right things. Um, but you know, there's not a lot of us.
Yeah.
Not a lot of us.
That's a good point. I didn't really think about that question because, like, I've heard this before too. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but like, I've had athletes before that they'll hire like their local coach and the coach is great, but then, the coach kind of phases out and ends up, focusing on another career avenue, right? So I think like that is a good question to ask a coach, like what their aspirations are long term.
Yeah, I mean, does it align with your goals? If if I look back, my first ever bikini pro, which was 2015, I started coaching her in 2014. Her name's Taylor. Shout out Taylor Jordan. Um, when she came to me, you know, I didn't know that she was going to be my first pro athlete. She was a competitive bodybuilder. And I remember she briefly left and went and worked with another coach because that coach was at more shows than me. And I couldn't be mad about that. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I wasn't going to a lot of shows back then. She ended up really disliking the approach that she was on. I remember correctly, like the email came back like, hey, like I realize you're not at every show, but I felt like, we had a better rapport. And so her turning pro and subsequently making her pro debut at Tampa, like that was a very, for me, it was a very, okay, this is something, because now other girls saw that I could do the job and they started reaching out to me. Right. So, it's not necessarily bad to be a coach's first successful athlete, but I would say just make sure that your vision aligns with their vision when you're having that discussion. Because if you're like, yeah, I want to go to the Olympia, and this coach is like, I hate bikini. Like maybe
Right. And also, I think this is a big one. Like when you should know this in your gut. Like once you have the consult call, do you trust this coach? Like, and what I mean by that is do you feel comfortable telling them things that maybe kind of, I don't know, weird? Because like there are things in prep, like, if you haven't gone to the bathroom in 3 days, or, things like that, that for some people, that is kind of a weird thing to like tell somebody else. But like if you don't feel comfortable sharing with your coach some of those minute details, like it could, the coach could be a great coach or a great person. But like personally, like if you don't feel comfortable opening up to the coach with those things, that may be something too for you to consider as well.
yep, yep. That's the key is, don't rush the decision, you know.
Yes.
And guys, just so we're clear, we are always available for free consultation. So if you go to prophysique.com, click the sign up button, you're going to get matched with the coach that, Sandy is amazing. She is our client liaison. She knows every coach on our staff and she knows what their goals are, their skills are. And so if you reach out to us and you put, hey, I want to do a bikini competition, a figure competition, I want to lose 5 pounds, I want to, win a marathon, we are going to put you in touch with the coach that best aligns with your goals. So do not hesitate to reach out for us.
Yeah. No, shout out to Sandy. She does a lot of she's been working for the company for a long time too, hasn't she?
I
I don't
mean, it's got to be 7 or 8 years. She
know.
actually started as a nanny for me and Misty and transitioned after not wanting to nanny anymore. And she had a background in the military, doing some work that we were like, hey, we could use you for some hourly work. And then now she just owns it.
She's great. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to inquire for coaching, but you have absolutely no idea who you want to work with, or if you want Sandy to match you with somebody, she's great
Oh
at
yeah,
it.
and if you go to our website, we've added this thing that's like if you go to prophysique.com, there's a little thing that pops up for like WhatsApp. You can literally just text her. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I know that there is that feature. Yeah. And she's really good at staying on top of those. So yeah, she's great. We're lucky to have her.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess we'll end it there for today, Lexi. We got a lot to talk about. I'm guessing just on
Too.
the fact that I've already seen two shows announced they're going to have the Fit Model Pro qualifier. I'm sure Universe, because Universe is the first show of the year where you get two pro cards in the open. I
Yeah.
don't know if I expect them to do that with Fit Model until they see the numbers. Um,
Very true. Would you assume, I mean, I guess your guess is probably as good as mine, but would you assume that they'll have Fit Model at Masters Nationals too?
hmm.
That's what I was kind of thinking. I'm like, I don't know. Because I feel like a lot of Masters ladies more so kind of fit bikini just because of that density, and they're
Uh-huh.
a little bit leaner usually. So that's definitely not Fit Model. So I'm just curious. I don't know.
Yeah. And the thing about a show is they got to reward who fits the criteria best that's there that day. So, um, but again, I think, the conversations I've had with most of my competitors that are planning for like Masters Nationals, we're sticking with bikini. Like, I
Yeah,
still want to focus on the bikini division. This is, I think these two divisions are very much aligned with my goals as a coach. So, whereas I don't coach figure, I'm not interested in turning women into men. That's just, my preference. Um, so I don't coach figure. I don't coach, the physique divisions, things like that. There's people out there to do that. That's great. But I think fit model and bikini are both in my wheelhouse. So I plan to, you know, accept individuals that are interested in both.
you have a couple wellness girls too, right?
I do. I do. Mickey did very well she won an overall last year for me. And then Viviana, but that's not a division that I'm like pursuing.
Yeah,
But if the right athlete comes along, I'll also coach wellness. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's more, I feel like it's a little bit more of a niche. Like you don't get a lot of, it's very genetic based. Like you don't get a lot of girls that can inquire in.
It's funny. I've had a couple girls that I've coached years ago, and I'm talking like 2015, 2016 in bikini that I'm like, man, they were like we were doing everything we could to hide their quads. Like they were wellness. And I kind of wish they would come back and just, I mean, because they would just walk through shows. But that's what that division is. It's, lower body, overly developed, highly genetic, predispositioned.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And also, Paul, do we want to shout out, do we have any tickets left for Command the Stage?
Sold out.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sold out, but stay tuned.
Actually, we oversold it by one, and I don't want to sell any more. But we are now looking for people that want to be involved in it that are sponsors. So if you're interested in coming and you are associated with an energy drink company, a suit company, a shoe company, actually Shoe Fairy is on as a sponsor already. But
And
if
I
you're
can
interested,
suits. We got the suits covered.
yeah, you got Angel Competitions. So they're not on as a sponsor yet. We got to get something
Oh,
official.
sure. Okay. Well, we'll make it official.
Talk to Kara. But the goal is to provide the entire inclusive experience for the competitors that are there that weekend at Brett's gym. It's going to be amazing. I'll say this: I didn't expect it to sell out so easily. We may have to do a second one this year.
Oh, I'm down. I
Yeah.
totally knew it was going to sell out. I was actually really worried because when the tickets went live, like I emailed my clients that were interested just because I thought it was going to like sell out super quickly. So wanted to make sure everybody got the opportunity.
Yeah, I think the fact that a few things, A, we kept it much more affordable this year, and then B, having it at Brett's gym, that's an experience in itself. And Florida at the end of March, before kind of things get going, but after the Arnold, I think it's just a really good window. So,
Yeah.
I thought the idea would be, and guys comment below if you're still listening and still with us, doing something in Texas later in the year because we get huge turnouts in Texas at that hidden gym. So, yeah.
I'm down for that. Always down to go to Texas.
Yeah. So I love Texas. There's a couple shows that would give us an opportunity to do like a 1 day event, maybe even a 2 day event. We'll figure something out, but um, yeah. And I have one other thing I won't announce yet, but I'm going to be doing like a freebie posing and seminar at one of my clients' gyms. So,
Awesome. All right. Well, have a good day, guys.
all right,
Where
guys.
day you're listening to this on. And again, comment below if there's anything in particular you guys want us to hit on in future episodes.
Yes. Next episode, we are going to go through the comments of this video. How about that?
Ooh, I like that. Okay, let's do it. Yeah, make them good.